All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a chapter from a classic theological work that makes a truly mind-blowing claim that prayer isn't just a quiet thought, but a force powerful enough to actually change the course of history. So, let's get right into it.
So, right out of the gate, Ravenhill sets the stakes unbelievably high. I mean, he doesn't ease you in at all. He just jumps straight into the deep end, quoting the ancient theologian Chrysostom. The idea here is that prayer is way more than just quiet personal reflection. It's a force that has literally changed the fabric of reality, taming fire, stopping the sun in the sky. Talk about a bold opening, right?
But, before we even get to that incredible power, Ravenhill actually pulls us back down to earth, to something superhuman, super relatable. That feeling of being totally overwhelmed and just not good enough when you're facing a massive challenge.
Yeah, he points to these giants of faith, right? Moses and Jeremiah. And when God calls them, you'd think they'd be all gung-ho, but nope. Their first instinct was to come up with a list of their own weaknesses. Moses is basically like, hey, I've got a stammering tongue. I'm not the right guy for this public speaking gig. And Jeremiah's excuse? He said he was just a kid, that he didn't have the experience. They felt totally inefficient and just not up to the task.
And this is where it gets really fascinating, God's response. He doesn't, send them to a public speaking coach or tell them to check back in a few years when they're older. Ravenhill argues that their objections were just overruled. The method wasn't about polishing their personalities, but as the book says, to closet them with himself. So the fix wasn't about them getting better on their own. It was all about getting closer to that divine power.
Okay, so that brings us to the core idea of this whole chapter. This is what explains why all that human inadequacy, it just doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. It's all about where the power comes from. And here we have it, the main idea, captured perfectly in the book's original artwork for the chapter. The whole concept is that prayer isn't playing on our level, with our weaknesses and strengths. Nah, it operates on this massive, cosmic, divine scale. It is, just like the title says, as vast as God.
So here's the absolute key takeaway. The power doesn't come from the person praying. It's not about how eloquent they are, how they're feeling, or how strong they are. The power of prayer is tied directly to the power of the one who hears it. For Ravenhill, it's simple. Prayer is huge, it's mighty, because God himself is backing it up and has promised to answer it.
And Ravenhill really drives this point home with this incredible comparison. Think about it. We can measure stars, we can time lightning, we can predict a sunrise. But the power of prayer? No way. You can't put a number on it. And why is that? Because its source is literally infinite.
Okay, so if this power is so huge and, supposedly accessible, how do you actually tap into it? Well, the author says the secret isn't found out in the open, in some public forum, or by reading a bunch of books. It's found in private, hidden devotion.
And he's super clear about this, almost blunt, really. Look, reading about prayer, it's not the same thing as actually praying. He's got this perfect analogy. You can read a whole library full of cookbooks, but that's not going to cook you a single meal. Same thing here. You can absorb all the information in the world about prayer, but you're not tapping into any of that power until you actually do it. And this brings us to this really interesting paradox at the heart of his argument. On the one hand, you need to pray to get the strength to live a holy life. But on the other hand, you need to live a holy life for your prayers to really be effective. So it's not like a simple step-by-step. It's more like a cycle, where each one feeds the other.
And to back this up, he's not just using his own logic. He goes straight to Scripture, quoting Psalm 24, which connects accessing God, ascending his hill, directly to your personal integrity, having clean hands and a pure heart. So for him, this stuff isn't just a nice to have. It's the absolute foundation for any prayer that's going to have real power.
All right, so now Ravenhill shifts gears a bit. He moves from all this theory to some seriously powerful historical proof. Real examples of people whose prayers didn't just change their own lives, but actually altered the course of nations.
He points to these incredible figures, Elijah, Paul, John Knox, David Livingstone. And the thing about them is, their legacies weren't really about their own natural talents. It was all about the insane power that was unleashed through their prayers.
I mean, just take Elijah. Ravenhill calls him skilled in the art of prayer. I love that phrasing. This wasn't just some casual thing for him. Through this art, he had a direct impact on the natural world and the future of Israel. He prayed, and fire literally fell from the sky. He prayed again, and a drought that had lasted 3 years came to a sudden, dramatic end.
Then you've got John Knox, the Reformation leader, and his prayer. Wow. It wasn't some quiet little request for himself. It was this massive, selfless, world-changing plea. He wasn't praying for a promotion, he was in a wrestling match in prayer for the soul of an entire nation. Like Ravenhill says, that prayer literally scored the pages of history.
And then there's David Livingstone, the missionary and explorer. Get this, Ravenhill points out that the man literally died on his knees, praying. And what was he asking for? Was it for fame? Safety? For his expedition to be a success? Nope. He was praying for the healing of the world's sin. His very last moments were spent pouring out a prayer for all of humanity.
So Ravenhill kind of brings this all home by throwing out this direct challenge, not just to the reader, but to us too. After hearing these epic stories and Chrysostom's majestic words, he asks, is this all just talk? Is it just mere rhetoric? Are we just, using fancy words to make a simple thing seem bigger than it really is?
And his answer is a resounding no. This power is 100% real. The real tragedy, for him, isn't that these stories are over the top. It's that our own prayers are often just so small. He wraps up with this really sobering thought, that the biggest regret a person of faith might have isn't about their failures, but about the smallness of their praying. And it just leaves you with this final, kind of provocative thought, doesn't it? What is the true scale of our own prayers?